All right. Hey, Jared. How are you?
Hey Douglas, very good sir. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Is that David Bowie behind you?
Yes, it is. David
Ah,
Bowie.
great.
The cover
Okay.
for his Low album, yeah. My absolute favorite, definitely.
Oh, super. So you're in the UK right now?
I am in the UK currently, yes.
In London?
In London, yes.
Okay.
It's getting colder and it's very terrible weather and we're in a lockdown at the moment, so it could be better, but the end is in sight, so we all remaining as optimistic as we possibly can.
Well, I saw that the Boris was going to lift the lockdown or something, right?
They're rolling out the vaccine quite fast, so there has been a lot of talk of that. But it's been the whole year already. We've been indoors, so it's who knows who's going to still be have their wits about them when they finally open the doors. But yeah, no, I feel like the end is in sight, and it's definitely a positive feeling, all in all.
Oh, well, good. Happy to hear that. This has gone on long enough, I think.
For everyone,
Yeah.
it's just so tiring.
So your bio is so full of stuff that you've done. I don't know if we're going to even get to cover it all in a 15-minute interview. But
No, yeah.
I thought I would just start with the sort of the basics and then we'll hit a couple of the points. So what do you call yourself? Are you an artist? Or are you a, what do you do
Yeah.
exactly?
Well, I'm a writer by trade, so that's where my bread and butter is by writing. So that's really kind of where my passion is, and I feel like that's what I'm best at. I respond to the word artist for sure, but I mean, I think there's a lot to be desired when it comes to a lot of my mediums. But I think as far as the one that's the most financially viable for me is definitely the writing side of it. So writer, but I accept artists definitely happily. All of them is great for me.
Well, because you've got writing on here, you've got filmmaking, you've got
Yeah.
music, so it sort of encompasses a lot. But let's start with the first one on here, which is called Pencilmation.
Yes.
Tell us about Pencilmation.
That's my actual job. It was started by a friend of mine called Ross Bollinger about 10 years ago, or even longer. But about 3 or 4 years ago, it just exploded. And it became actually the biggest animation channel on YouTube. And I was very fortunate that he was looking for writers and he knew I was a writer. So he said, "Hey, would you like to join?" By that time, there were about 2 million subscribers. And I joined about 3 years ago. Now we're about 18 million subscribers.
Wow.
And yeah, that's my job. I write cartoons for kids for a living, which really is it doesn't really feel like a job at all. It doesn't even sound like a job, does it? So yeah, I'm very fortunate when it comes to my writing life.
So Pencilmation is an animation. I assume it's just a pencil drawing. Is that correct?
It kind of started out that way. The originals, way back in the day, like a pencil would come in and draw the characters and kind of play around with them. But as time has gone on and the company's expanded to include hundreds and hundreds of different workers, including animators and writers like myself and different forms of production, that now it's just a typical cartoon in some ways. It's there's no dialogue, which we think is probably an advantage for us because it's quite internationally enjoyed for the reasons that there's no language barrier. But yeah, it's just a guy called Pencilmate, and he runs around and he just often gets hurt, which is my fault. I write him getting hurt a lot, which is what the kids like, I guess.
There's no dialogue, so it's a silent. Is it just music score under
There's
it?
music and
Yeah.
sound effects, and I mean, very occasionally we'll slip some dialogue in, but or like a word or two. But no, it's generally completely dialogue free.
Well, I think that's great because, like you said, anybody can watch it and understand it.
Exactly.
You're not
Yeah,
limiting your audience to the English-speaking world.
which so many cartoons do, and I think it's just especially when it comes to YouTube, it's like you can't be just putting up different dubs and different versions for everyone. I'm not sure if that was even done intentionally, but I think it was kind of just a happy accident that we realized that there was that just dialogue kind of benefited the show in general.
Well, it's funny because over 100 years ago, Charlie Chaplin said the exact same thing when film was switching over to sound. And he said, you know, I'm going to lose a lot of my audience because they don't speak English.
It's such a good point, and I mean, he was the master of that. And I think it's interesting because it does make your life a little more difficult. And I'm sure Charlie Chaplin would agree in some ways that you know to rely on humor without explaining yourself or without just kind of relying on an exchange of words. You have to really get physical with the comedy, and yeah, he was the master of that. Of course, he was the best.
Let's move on. Moving right along. Heartbreak Sucks.
Yes. That's my book. That's the book that I've just recently released. I released it on Valentine's Day, 14th of February.
Oh, good day to release it.
Yeah, it's good timing, right? It was very intentional. And the full title is Heartbreak Sucks: How to Get Over Your Breakup in 30 Days. And it's just basically a system that I developed after, obviously, my own experiences, which just was step-by-step daily tasks. Always kind of fun, enjoyable things you can do to distract the mind, to avoid destructive behavior, and just to come out the other side to kind of hopefully feel that the breakup wasn't the worst thing that ever happened, and hopefully even could be quite beneficial in the long run. So it's a big aim, but I've had some very positive feedback already. So I'm hoping to just cure the world of heartbreak. Basically, let's see how that goes.
Well, give us an example.
There's plenty of ones, but like there's obviously the cliche examples. There's a day where I address things like rebounding. People want to know how quickly, how fast they should move on to the next person. Obviously, and the answer is it's circumstantial, but I kind of cover like, if this is your circumstance, think about it this way, etc. But I cover the boring things like there's days that I address things like you should look after your diet and not just eat a bunch of ice cream and try go out for walks. Very typical stuff. But then there's also more unique days about changing your appearance, finding relief in comedy or conversation with friends. It's all kind of stuff like that. Just I'm trying to think of like a really good example, but like, there's a day that kind of is more about practicing forgiveness, and there's days that are about making sure that you're messing with your routine a bit, making sure your routine's exciting and changing up. And so it's just, every day, just very small little things like that. Very, very manageable, bite-sized tasks that are always presented, what I like to believe, in a humorous fashion that would just provide just some stability on a day-to-day routine for a person. That would be otherwise maybe a bit lost with such a new void in their life.
Do you think that the heartbreak is more severe when you initiate the breakup or when your partner does?
Once again, I think that's very circumstantial, but I mean, I think most people would lean towards it's more difficult when the other person does it, because there's a loss of control and there's there's a lack of a sense of closure. I think when you make the decision yourself, there's probably a good reason why, but when someone else makes the decision, it's obviously just you feel a little helpless. But I really feel like it'd be quite minimal, the difference between these two things. A breakup's a breakup, and it's quite chemical. What I found with all my research, and I think a few people do know that, is that it's a brain reaction, and certain triggers happen in your brain that are similar to addictions and similar to just alcoholism and those kind of gambling. It's an addictive kind of feeling of loss. So yeah, I think regardless of the circumstance, it's going to be a nasty ride. That's unavoidable.
Well, true. Although I've always equated the difference between having a piano falling on your head or actually jumping off a building. Because you've made the decision yourself to jump from the relationship, but the end result can be still the same.
I like that. That's great. I wish I'd spoken to you before I wrote the book. I could have put that in somewhere.
Okay. Well, anyways, so you've got another book called This Is Your Brain on Drugs?
Yes. That's a fictional story. It's a collection of fictional short stories that all kind of occur in the same world, and they loosely connect. And yeah, that was written quite a few years ago. But yeah, that's more of a comedic kind of humorous, fictional nonsense, kind of surrealistic first attempt at writing a book, basically.
Okay, because there was an old government infomercial that came out
Yes.
in the 80s. Is that what you're kind of referencing?
Yeah, it's just that it was when I was trying to think of a name, I wanted something that was recognizable but also sort of shocking. You kind of hear that and you go, "What's that book about?" And obviously, my parents thought it was the worst name they've ever heard. But it's just one of those things that I thought kind of grabs your attention a bit, because especially when it's I don't know if you've seen the cover, but it's a big brain with a big smiley face, so it's a bit, it's about being something that's gets people to go, "What?" But also at the same time, we all remember that advert. That advert was really, it's been referenced many times in popular culture. So I hope it was a good choice.
That was the one with the egg frying.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I do remember
funny.
that.
Yeah, hilarious. But a good warning, I think, at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know how effective it was for people, but
No, probably not at all.
while someone was busy getting high and they're watching an egg frying,
Yeah,
the only thing I could think of is it made me hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
So true. Okay, so now we got to get to the Lego trip, because you have that on. You confused my producer. Thank you for having that on there, because he was looking for Jared to set up the account, and
I apologize about that.
So what is the Lego significance?
It's I wish there was some fantastic story that I could tell you. It's actually quite boring, but it was just a play on words. Basically, Jared Woods as a name, I love it. It is my name, but there are other Jared Woodses. So and often their usernames are taken. So I was forced to come up with something else. And it's just ego trip. When someone has an ego trip, but I just put an L in front of it, Lego trip, and it just became it's just been a nickname I've used for many years, decades. It just stuck. I wish there was a hilarious story to go with that, but it's just I like Lego. I do like Lego, so
it's clever, and I didn't get that. I didn't catch the
no one does.
Drop the L.
I have to explain it. Yeah, I should probably explain it more.
Then it reminded me of that song, Ed Sheeran's. Was it Lego House or something?
Yeah, there is something, isn't there? Ed Sheeran, is that what you said?
Ed Sheeran, yeah.
I do remember something like that, but I assure you that was nothing to do with what I was thinking.
Okay. But then you've also got something here called Lego, hashtag Lego Biscuits.
Those are drawings that I draw every day on Instagram. So at Lego Trip, if you go there, it's just those are just very crude rush drawings. I take 15 minutes a day, and I just draw them on line paper. More about concepts. I try to make them just funny, kind of one-liners that I illustrate. People seem to really enjoy that, and I think it's one of the of all my projects, it's kind of the one that pulls more people to my profiles and then can lead them on to other things. So it's definitely done the job.
Well, what are the drawings of?
Just different things. I wish I could.
You have one?
Yeah, no? they're way away.
Okay.
I just recommend you check them out. But it's just kind of funny jokes that I think of. That I just draw. I draw a little character playing the fool. There's hundreds of them. I'm nearly on the 700th one. So if anyone's interested, I do recommend you check them out, because you could spend a whole evening looking at them if you so wanted to.
We are kind of running down on time, but I wanted to ask you one last thing.
Sure.
Since you seem to be heavy into content creation, what sort of advice would you give for somebody who is enthusiastic about creating content in the hopes that it's going to go somewhere? What would you recommend for them?
I would honestly recommend, first and foremost, that don't worry about it going anywhere. That's going to be the thing that trips you up. That's been my experience. Every time I've tried to do something to get a certain reaction, it generally didn't. The hardest thing is getting people to pay attention to what you're doing these days. The so much content on the internet, and so you might as well just make sure that you're really proud of the work. And if someone likes it or no one sees it, that should actually be secondary to whether you're really happy with the work you've done yourself. And that will come through on the work, has been my experience, is that when you try to do a piece and you try to do it in a way that you think this is really going to get people's attention, that your intention kind of comes across. But if you really just love what you do, the vibe comes through and people pick up on that. So that's always my advice, is just do what you absolutely love doing, so that even if it doesn't work, you still never regret doing it.
That's good advice.
Thank you.
I've always said that in any kind of artistic, creative endeavors, the passion has to be first. And
I couldn't agree more.
If your attitude is going in this with the expectations of making money, don't go into it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I've made that mistake before, and it's always just been a failure, and you fail yourself at the same time. It's not worth it.
Well, Jared, we got to wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on.
Douglas, I appreciate so much spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Especially with a lockdown, it's great to have a conversation with a human being.
Before we go, give out your website, please.
Sure. My website is jaredwoodsavemylife.com. That's one R, so JaredWoods, savemylife.com, one word. And also at Lego Trip, as I say, is where Instagram is, and you can find everything on both those places.
Great. Well, thanks again, and check out the book, Heartbreak Sucks. What's the rest of it?
How to Get Over Your Breakup in 30 Days. Okay. Guaranteed.
Super. All right.